Gento the Yahoo publicly declares that he has survived an alleged assassination attempt and vows never to betray Biafra, even at the cost of his life. He accuses Nigerian officials, particularly Hope Uzodinma, referred to as Hope Man and Purpose Man, of being deeply corrupt, violent, and working against the Biafran cause. Gento claims that Hope Uzodinma tried to recruit him and his group for illegal activities such as kidnapping, assassination, and suppressing opposition, in exchange for control over oil and other benefits. He reveals a failed attempt to poison him and rejects claims that he or his group ever attacked fellow Biafrans on Uzodinma's orders. The critic insists that a revolution is near, calling on all Biafrans to wake up, resist betrayal, and defend their homeland with strength and unity. Gento appeals to international communities, demanding an investigation into the actions of Hope Uzodinma and others he accuses of working with Fulani jihadists and selling out the southeastern region. He strongly opposes the branding of Biafran freedom fighters as terrorists, emphasizing that self-defense and self-determination are not crimes under international law. Gento expresses deep frustration over the violence in Biafra land, including massacres, rapes, and destruction allegedly committed by state forces and Fulani groups. He urges Biafrans in Nigeria and the diaspora to stay united and fight against political and religious oppression, insisting Biafra is not and will never be an Islamic nation. Finally, he salutes Donald Trump and declares that the gods of the land are now working to expose and punish all enemies of Biafra, asserting that the struggle for liberation is unstoppable. Let me take you step by step through the dramatic story that unfolded in mid-April 2025, when Gento the Yahoo stepped before his camera to share a message that shook the hearts of everyone who cares about the future of the southeastern region of Nigeria. He spoke with urgency and with conviction, laying bare how close he came to losing his life and why he is determined never to turn his back on the cause he holds dear. As you read this, imagine sitting beside him, listening to his voice tremble with indignation and hope, feeling the weight of history in every word. Gento the Yahoo began by reminding his listeners of the risks that come with speaking out. He said that anyone who dares to lift the veil of secrecy surrounding those in power is likely to find themselves facing death. He spoke of faces twisted by corruption, of plans hatched in shadowy rooms, and of hit squads sent to silence voices of conscience. Despite knowing that danger lurked at every turn, he declared that he would rather be assassinated than betray the cause of Biafra. He portrayed himself as a devoted son of Biafra, as someone whose loyalty runs deeper than fear. He said that if betraying his nation were ever an option, he would choose death instead. It would be better to die than to betray the motherland he loves. He then turned his attention to Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State. He used formal titles to remind us that this was not mere gossip, but accusations leveled against a sitting governor. Gento the Yahoo accused Governor Hope Uzodinma of corruption so deep that it could only have been cultivated over years of unaccountable rule. He described illicit meetings in which the governor allegedly tried to recruit him and his fighters for criminal operations, kidnappings for ransom, political assassinations, and violent attacks on peaceful protesters. In exchange, the governor had promised them control over oil revenue and other lucrative contracts. When Gento the Yahoo and his group refused, the governor supposedly retaliated by arranging for their food and water to be laced with poison. As he spoke, you could almost see the anger rise in his eyes. He told of how even the attempt to kill him by poisoning could not break his resolve or weaken his faith in the struggle for self-determination. He insisted on his own integrity and on that of his comrades. He rejected outright any suggestion that he had ever carried out attacks on innocent Biafrans at the governor's behest. He spoke of being offered green leaf, a coded phrase for a packaged poison, which they had refused, knowing full well what was hidden inside. He recounted how the governor had tried to use other groups, including local police informants, to carry out those attacks once his own men would not comply. At one point, he asked every listener to imagine the scene: communities living in fear, people wondering if the next attack would be by armed robbers or by state agents masquerading as guardians of law and order. He asked you to think about mothers who could not send their daughters to fetch water because rumors of kidnappings swirled in every market, and fathers who kept their sons home from school for fear that they would be forced into some dark operation. He spoke of entire villages made unsafe by armed Fulani militia supported by state officials, of churches burned to the ground, of rapes and killings hidden from the world by official silence. Gento de Yahoo carried his listeners back to the day before his video was released, to Thursday, April 17, 2025. He reminded everyone that just days earlier, rumors had circulated on social media claiming that the Nigerian army had raided his hideout. He himself had heard those rumors and had even downplayed them, saying there was no evidence. Yet now, he said, that unverified story had served as a pretext for deeper attacks on the grassroots movement he represented. He described seeing commentary online blaming him personally for any setbacks, as though somehow his daring to speak out had invited the reprisal. What struck him most was how quickly ordinary people were willing to point fingers at one another. He had seen videos on TikTok and Facebook in which members of his own community echoed the lies that the governor's camp had planted. They said that he had gone down to meet with the governor, that he had secretly struck a deal and was now betraying the cause himself. He could not believe how far those rumors had spread, and how eagerly some of his own people seized them to justify intensified repression. To clear the air, Gento de Yahoo invited viewers to watch his own unedited footage, to witness for themselves the truth of his words. He promised that every claim he made was backed by witnesses, fellow commanders, former associates who had seen the governor's men offer them bribes, weapons and oil concessions in exchange for their loyalty. He named each of those commanders by their full titles: Major General Chukwuma Kingsley, Brigadier General Ebuka Maduabuchi, Colonel Ifeanyi Chinedu, and others whose courage he praised. He asked them all to come forward if they dared, to stand by him and to confirm that Governor Hope Uzodinma had asked them to betray their oath of loyalty to Biafra. Gento de Yahoo spoke of a revolution on the horizon. He urged every Biafran, both at home and in the diaspora, to shake off complacency, to cast off the chains of betrayal, and to rise in defense of their homeland. He spoke of unity as the foundation of success, warning that division would only make it easier for those in power to crush them one by one. He reminded his audience that the movement had survived worse betrayals in the past because ordinary people themselves had refused to bow. He spoke of the blood of their ancestors, of the sacrifices made during the Biafran War of 1967 to 1970, and of the unbreakable spirit that had carried them through famine, through disease, and through violence. He appealed directly to international human rights organizations and to governments around the world. He demanded an independent investigation into Governor Hope Uzodinma's dealings with armed Fulani groups, into his alleged use of poison, and into the legal and financial maneuvers that had allowed him to amass wealth at the expense of the people he claimed to serve. He reminded the world that self-determination is a right protected by the United Nations Charter and by international law. He insisted that labeling Biafran freedom fighters as terrorists was not only incorrect, but unconscionable, that it equated the victims with the oppressors. He asked scholars, activists, journalists, and diplomats to examine the facts rather than repeat the official line. There was a palpable sadness in his voice when he spoke of the violence that had engulfed Biafra in recent years. He described massacres carried out by state security forces in villages like Umuahia South and Afam East, of women raped by men in military uniforms and by armed Fulani vigilantes, of entire families uprooted from their farms at gunpoint. He spoke of children who had witnessed the slaughter of their relatives and who would grow up knowing only fear. He spoke of churches that had become mass graves, of mosques torched by invaders, of schools turned into barracks. He said that no story of self-determination could ignore the human cost of oppression. And yet amid the grief, he offered hope. He reminded his listeners that the soul of any nation is carried in the hearts of its people. He urged Biafrans in Lagos, in Abuja, in Port Harcourt, in Onitsha, and in every corner of the world to stay connected, to share information, to support peaceful protests and to lobby foreign governments. He spoke of the Biafran community in Houston, in London, in Johannesburg, urging them to use their votes, their voices in the media, and their resources to shine a light on what was happening back home. He reminded them that the fight for freedom is waged not only on the battlefield, but in boardrooms, courtrooms, and diplomatic salons. Gento was careful to distinguish between violence as a tactic and violence as a crime. He welcomed peaceful demonstrations, lawful civil disobedience, and the prosecution of corrupt officials through proper channels. He deplored senseless bloodshed and warned that any attack on innocent civilians would undermine the legitimacy of their cause. At the same time, he insisted that any people under occupation have the right to defend their lives and their communities. He rejected the blanket application of terrorism labels, pointing out that under the Geneva Conventions, self-defense against an occupying force is not a crime. He asked lawyers around the world to study the Biafran case and to challenge any attempts by the Nigerian government to freeze assets or to blacklist peaceful dissidents. Throughout his speech, Gento wove in personal stories. He spoke of his childhood in Owerri, of nights spent under mosquito nets, listening to his grandmother recite stories of the old eastern region before the war. He remembered his first taste of palm wine at a festival in Aba when he was 9 years old, and how the laughter of children echoed through the street as drums beat in the distance. He spoke of the first time he carried a rifle, not out of hatred, but out of a sense of duty to protect his family when attacks came. He shared the moment he first realized that loyalty to his land was worth more than money or titles. These details made him more than a voice on a screen. They made him one of their own. As he closed his video, he looked straight into the camera and spoke of higher powers. He invoked the spirits of their ancestors, the gods of the land, to bear witness to the struggle and to judge those who betrayed Biafra. He spoke of divine justice, saying it would be harsher and more certain than any human court. He then offered a salute to Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, calling him His Excellency Donald John Trump, and thanking him for past expressions of sympathy toward oppressed peoples. He spoke of how the former president's rhetoric on national sovereignty and self-interest resonated with Biafrans, seeking to chart their own destiny. He ended with a rallying cry: Biafran freedom fighters are not terrorists. They are men and women who love their land more than they fear death. They are children of the soil who will defend their heritage with every breath. He promised that no amount of bullets, poison, intimidation or slander would derail their march towards self-determination. He said that the struggle was unstoppable, that the day would come. In the days that followed, his video spread across social platforms, galvanizing some, alarming others, and baffling those who had not heard of the modern Biafran movement. For supporters, it was a clarion call to action. For opponents, it was proof of a dangerous radicalism that needed to be quashed. For neutral observers, it raised questions about the health of Nigerian democracy and the lengths to which state actors might go to preserve power. It forced analysts in Lagos and Abuja to reckon with a movement that many had dismissed as fringe, to recognize that beneath the headlines of oil theft and election disputes lay a deeper yearning for identity and justice. One thing became clear: whether one agreed with Gento or not, his words could not be ignored. He had named names, he had laid out allegations, and he had challenged not only Governor Hope Uzodinma, but the institutions that allow corruption and violence to flourish. He had revealed the human stories behind the politics, reminding everyone that at stake were real lives and real homes. He had called for unity, for peaceful defense, and for international solidarity. And he had dared to proclaim that even if the governors, the generals, and the international community turned a blind eye, the spirit of Biafra would never be extinguished. Listening to his speech, one cannot help but feel the tension between fear and hope. The fear that comes from hearing how easily a life can be taken, how thin the line is between order and chaos, how betrayal can come from the highest office, and the hope that springs from seeing someone stand unflinchingly and speak the truth, no matter the cost. It is a reminder that every movement, every cause, depends on the courage of individuals who choose principle over safety, love over convenience. In the weeks and months ahead, as investigations are launched, and as the conversation shifts from social media to the halls of power in Abuja, Ottawa, London, and New York, the flame that Gento de Yahoo lit with his words will continue to flicker. Will it become a blaze that demands reform and justice? Will it be extinguished by repression and indifference? The answer will depend on all of us who hear his call, Biafrans and non-Biafrans alike, and on whether we have the will to stand for truth, to protect the innocent, and to believe that no matter how dark the night, a single voice can bring the dawn. This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.